Hey everybody, Tom Barnes, stories from the 78th, from the 10th floor of Chicago's Fine Arts Building. You're looking down the main hallway with all the studio spaces on the side. A lot of history in this old building, over 120 years old. My friend Keir Graff wrote a wonderful book about the history of this building. We're going to talk to him now for this story from the 78. But first, I thought I'd show you a little bit of the artwork here on the 10th floor. There's a famous story, and of course when you're in this space, there's always music. So in one of the many studios here in the Fine Arts Building, I'm here with the author of this wonderful book, Keir Graff. How are you, sir?
I'm good.
Thanks for having me. This is a fun opportunity for me just to hang out inside one of the studios, one of the working studios here. I've been here for a lot of display stuff, but this is fun. So thanks for writing this wonderful book and having me in to talk about it.
Absolutely, my pleasure. I mean, writing this book has been one of the true privileges of my career.
Yeah, it's no small feat because this building is old. Why don't you give a little history of the space, if you would?
Yeah, well, so the building was built in 1885 by the Studebaker brothers, who were at the time manufacturing, horse-drawn carriages, buggies, and it was, an 8-story building then, and it was both a show place and a sales floor, but a place where they could assemble stuff. A lot of the parts were forged in South Bend. It all came together here, and it was a magnificent showpiece, and 13 years later they outgrew it. And so they moved around the corner to a building on Wabash, and Charles Curtis, who's a really fascinating guy in Chicago history, it probably just would have been sold to another company. And Charles Curtis, who had a lot of experience in the arts, he had a lot of retail experience as well. He went to the Studebaker brothers and basically said, I've got a vision. I think we can repurpose this building into, a commercial space, but it's for the arts. And they liked his vision, they bought it, and in 1898 it reopened and was rededicated as the Fine Arts Building.
Wow. I mean, and you think about history in Chicago at that time, you're coming off the World's Fair down in Jackson Park, and there's so much happening in this city back then, so much so that these guys had to move out of the building. But then to think and let this gigantic space that's on Michigan Avenue in downtown Chicago be devoted to the arts, I feel like it was really progressive for its time.
Incredibly so. But it also made a lot of sense because, we talk about the cultural mile now, but at that time, this was already becoming a hub of culture. You had the Art Institute in its earlier incarnation was just to the north. Mm-hmm. The Chicago Symphony, under a slightly different name, was playing in the auditorium building. And then Wabash was known as Music Row. It was full of all of these music stores and sheet music stores and piano dealers. And so I think that went into Curtis's thinking as far as this is a perfect place to situate it. And there were other buildings around that were housing artists. Tree Studios wasn't built yet, but there were other buildings in the loop. But they had a bigger and grander vision, and this quickly became the magnet for Chicago artists.
And not only Chicago artists, but Chicago artists that went on to affect the world in what their art was. I mean, forgive me if I'm wrong, or correct me if I'm wrong, but did the author of Wizard of Oz, didn't they write out of here at one point?
So L. Frank Baum was an Oak Park guy. He didn't write here, but the illustrator.
Oh, okay, that's what it was.
The illustrations were done on the 10th floor, and the publisher was also situated on the 10th floor. So the Wizard of Oz, which is very much a Chicago kind of production, has its home on the 10th floor of the Fine Arts Building. And there's so many illustrious names associated with this building. I mean, Laredo Taft, Chicago's most famous sculptor, had a studio on the 10th floor. A New York newspaper actually called the 10th floor Chicago's Parnassus because it was full of these luminaries, and it was just the place to be. It was the hub. When this building opened in 1898, there was this kind of hothouse of artistic and intellectual activity centered in this building, but largely on the 10th floor.
Why the 10th floor?
Well, the 10th floor was the prime real estate. As you can see in this studio, all the ceilings are high, all the windows are big. It's just a gorgeous place to be. But the 10th floor was even more special. The ceilings had a lot of the studios had skylights with the idea that they would be like north-facing skylights, so great for painters to work in. They had sliding doors to accommodate large artworks. And I think that, I don't really know the sequence of who moved in when, but I think that what happened was, a couple of people like Ralph Clarkson, a portrait painter, moved in, and then other people said, well, I want to be there too. Just as it would happen today, so like suddenly it became a hot neighborhood.
It was almost like a tech hub of today, but back then with art.
Right, yeah.
I hate to use the tech hub with art, but the analogy, like that happened over at the Merchandise Mart where they had, a tech think tank or whatever.
Yeah.
But I imagine the space on the 10th floor with the skylights, those were all here though prior, right? Or were those put in?
They were
this?
not. So this was an
This is why I'm talking to you.
This was an 8-story building when it opened, and then as part of the refurbishment, which took less than a year, which like boggles my mind today. Like you can't do anything construction-wise in Chicago for less than a year. Like you can't make a house practically in less than a year. But they retrofitted this entire building, and they took off the original 8th floor and then built on 3 new floors, so effectively making an 8-story building a 10-story building. So if you look at old photographs, the roof line was very, very different. It was actually kind of a more beautiful roof line in the original incarnation. Now it's just this kind of flat roof.
So on the cover of the book, is that with the new roof on? And you can kind of, now that you say it, I can kind of tell the new part of the building.
Yes, yeah. If you look at it, you can kind of see the demarcation. Correct. The cover of the book represents the way it looks today.
That's fascinating. I did not know that about it. But I imagine, on the cover itself, you have music, magic, and murder.
Yes.
Why did you go with that?
Well, to sell books.
Well done.
Yeah, titles are so important. And so I certainly knew that the title had to be something descriptive and easily searchable and representative of the contents, Chicago's Fine Arts Building. Mm-hmm. But I wanted a subtitle that would engage readers. And so music had to be first, because of all the arts, I think that music is probably the art that has been most represented over the years in the Fine Arts Building. In the early years, the more tenants than not were music related, like music instruction made up a huge part of the early studios. And magic, because I have to say that word comes back again and again when I talk to people who have had an encounter with the building, people who work in the building, people who love the building. People just kind of stumble to express themselves, and then they say it's just magic, and it does feel like magic at times. And then murder, because I wanted to pique people's curiosity. I wanted to get them to open the book and learn this great history. And so one of the ways you've got to do that is to make them say, what?
Yeah,
and sadly, there has been a murder in the building. There have been multiple murders in the building.
Really?
I really only tell the story of one murder. In 1980, a drama teacher named Everett Clark was killed on the 10th floor in his studio. And
so a predominant person, because they're on the 10th floor, like you said earlier.
Well, so this was a different era of the Fine Arts
1980?
Building. 1980, yeah.
So downtown was a little different back then.
Yeah, very much so. So what happened was the Fine Arts Building, to back up a little bit.
Sure.
Its glory years were really, from the day it opened in 1898 through the teens and mid-20s, some of the prominent tenants started to kind of leave. And then, of course, we had the Great Depression, and then it really, the fortunes kind of took a turn. And then through the middle of the 20th century, it really went decades of kind of neglect and disrepair and, being half full and being sold again and again for less and less money. There were very real concerns this place was going to be torn down. In the 70s, that was a real possibility. Some people were saying that the land under the building was more valuable than the building itself. So the fact that this building is here, you could say, is a miracle or magic.
Yeah.
But in 1979, an owner named Tom Graham came into the picture, and he was the face of a small consortium of investors that he didn't have a lot of money to invest in the building, but he invested a lot of love and care, and it kind of started to come back to life. But in 1980, a year after he came into the picture, it was still half empty, still in pretty rough shape. So the 10th floor, I think Everett Clark, the teacher, had been there since, I think he'd been teaching for decades. He had been a famous radio actor in like the golden age of radio, 30s, 40s, maybe in the early 50s, but the TV comes in the 50s. Maybe he had a face for TV, or a face for, I got
radio,
that wrong. Maybe he had a face for radio. Whatever, his career seemed to end as an actor, and then he became a teacher. So he took a studio on the 10th floor. Maybe he just needed a little extra space. I know that his studio had a small practice stage in one corner. And so he taught for decades, became a beloved acting teacher. And the neighbors on either side were used to hearing strange noises from his studio because he would be acting things out. He'd be urging his students to be more forceful or louder or whatever.
I mean, as you talk now, I hear some briefly music playing. So
Absolutely.
It's just kind of the character, the DNA of the building, right?
It's the soundtrack of the building. There's just always something coming in, and you don't know if somebody's acting or it's real. You don't know if somebody's recording a performance or they're rehearsing it. The painter next door to Everett heard him say, "No, Paul, no, God, no." And she thought they were acting out a scene. Well, it turned out he never went home that night. And when his partner grew concerned, he called the painter who was next door, and she got an elevator operator to open the studio, and they found him stabbed to death on his practice stage.
Oh my gosh.
And I tell the whole story of how they found the killer in the book. And it's, I don't want to say it's this book is not about true crime. That's a chapter in the book,
sure,
essentially. And I touch on some of the other tragedies. And I've found you will absolutely meet people who are tenants of this building who believe it is haunted. Really? I have wondered, does any building that has existed this long have its share of tragedies? In some ways, I think that's the reason, but sometimes I think it's maybe just that this building does have a greater share of tragedies. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. I think one, it's always been open to the public. There's no guard at the front door making you sign in. You can come and go. Mm-hmm. And so
that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, and that's really the beauty of it.
It's almost nowadays, it's almost like, I even called you to come when I came in because I wasn't sure if I could just come up,
right.
Because it's a working studio space for so many people.
Yes, and that's the beauty of the building, and it couldn't be the Fine Arts building without that openness. But I think in some ways that's also allowed access to people over the years who maybe had something darker in mind or impulses they couldn't control. So yeah, there are some half dozen gruesome incidents that have taken place in this building over the years. But I certainly don't want to dwell on it, but I don't want to ignore it either because that's part of the story.
Yeah, and this story being well over 100 years, this building has been a cornerstone of the arts community here in Chicago. What is some of your favorite stuff that you wrote about in the book?
Well, one of my favorite aspects of this building is, the tenants are the most important part of the building, no question. But the staff of this building is so important as well. This book, originally, portions of it were published as an article in New City, coinciding with the 125th anniversary of the building. And one of my favorite portions of that was profiles of elevator operators, engineers, people who work in the building, because I just think that, without them, this place doesn't run. Mm-hmm. And they have artistry of their own. The people who keep things running. Marcin Kroll, the head engineer, gave me just amazing access to the building, from the depths of the basement to the top, to the roof, where there's no parapet. It's a little scary. Yeah. And he's an artist in his own right. He's an artist of steam. He is slowly bringing this old steam heat system back to the way it was originally designed after years of neglect. And so he's got an art of his own. Operating the elevators is an art.
Still hand operated.
Still hand operated.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And so I think that, for me, that has just been a real treasure, a treasured part of writing this book, researching this whole story. But, there's so many studios I haven't been in, but just having an excuse to visit studios and meet artists and walk in and say, what are you doing? And just have your mind blown on a regular basis. I have a line in the book, not to quote myself, but, I say that it's a building that hides worlds behind its doors. And, all buildings do to some extent, but I feel like the Fine Arts building I haven't encountered a building in Chicago that hides more worlds, more different worlds behind its doors than the Fine Arts Building.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on that. I mean, I know in the building they make violins in this building, and it's so unassuming. You look and it's like to the right, and you go in, and then you see it, and you're just like, oh my goodness, they're just everywhere.
William Harris Lee on the 5th floor is the largest maker of violins and violas in the country.
Isn't that incredible?
Which is, right here in Chicago. But not only that, on the 10th floor, you've got John K. Becker and Company. They are the world's premier restorer of rare and expensive violins. And there are only 2 of a half dozen violin, luthiers in the building. So there's little shops too.
Yeah. What would you say is the oddest studio space here where you're like, wow, that definitely makes us what we are?
Well, I think one of the most wonderful studios in this building is Jamal Hemphill has a studio. It says Red Birds Everywhere on the studio door, so you don't necessarily know what it does. And he's like a lot of people here. He has multiple hustles, but primarily he's a barber. And so you can get your hair cut here in the Fine Arts Building on the 7th floor. Yeah.
I did not know that.
Nobody knows, but he keeps a steady stream of bookings. He just books by app, but Jamal also does headshots. He also does graphic design. He's just a fascinating, creative individual, and I love sitting in his chair, getting my hair cut, having these wonderfully wide-ranging conversations, fascinating guy. And to me, he's just symbolic of the wonder and magic of this building. You never know who you're going to meet.
What floor is that on?
7th floor.
7th floor.
Yeah.
I'll have to check that one out for sure, just because that's so randomly unique to this building. And you have the fine right to be in the building. How did you get to write this book? Like, is it because you are an author and you've done obviously other things, right? And did they like, well, since you're in the building, we want you to write it? Or how did that whole thing come about, or did you pitch them?
So it very much landed in my lap. Years and years ago, I used to write for New City, late 90s, early aughts. And I haven't really done that kind of freelancing, for a long, long time. I have been writing books since the late 2000s. Mm-hmm. And I was at a friend's book launch, and I reconnected with Brian Higelke, the publisher of New City, which is, that's an arts treasure in Chicago. Their arts coverage is, at a time when newspapers are eliminating a lot of their arts coverage, New City is really carrying the banner high and doing a great job. And Brian, I just casually mentioned that I had a studio in the Fine Arts Building now, and he said, oh, I love the Fine Arts Building. Would you like to write about it? And I was kind of like, well, I don't really do that kind of stuff anymore. He said, you can go long if you want. I said, well, how long? He said, as long as you want, which is good because I don't know how to write short articles anymore. So I wrote and wrote, and he kept telling me it was okay to write more and more. And finally, I published an article that was basically the entire issue of New City. It was like a 25,000 word article. And I kept writing more because it was so fascinating and so fun to research. Now, as you can see behind me, I primarily write fiction. Mm-hmm. I haven't done nonfiction in a long time. I've never done a nonfiction book until now. And so that was both something that kind of concerned me because I'm not a Chicago historian. I know there's a lot of great historians who are going to be looking at this, and I hope that they approve. I hope they feel I did a good job. But I am a storyteller, and I thought, nobody has written this book yet.
Which is incredible. It's been around for over 120 years, and nobody sat down like, we should talk about this book and put it down, pen to paper.
There was a monograph published in the early 1900s. It's like a 24-page book. It was basically a commercial piece. And those are very rare, but it's certainly out of date. I have since met 2 different people who told me they wanted to write the fine arts book, and I would have loved to read their version too, but for one reason or another, it didn't get done. And so I ended up being the lucky guy who got to do it. And so, this is not an exhaustive history because I don't know how much appetite the general public has for a 400-page book about a single building. This is a capsule history, and it's a beautiful coffee table book. It's loaded with amazing images, principal photography by Tom Mayday, a wonderful photographer. Kendra Huspaska, who is the art director for Trope, added just unbelievable historical images and put them together in an artistic way. And so I think it's a book that works for people who just want to browse it and look at the pictures. It's also a book for people who want to dig a little deeper and learn the story. There's certainly a lot of storytelling and a lot of history.
Yeah.
But, if some scholar wants to do the University of Chicago, deep dive that really richly documents everything with footnotes, like there's still room for that book, and I would love to read it.
In all of your research, you said you had this access where you were able to go to maybe studios that otherwise you wouldn't go to or whatnot, or parts of the building. Yeah. Is there a spot that when you were doing all this research in the building that fascinated you, either because it was terrifying or because life just doesn't go that way anymore? Like, because this building has many chapters that probably won't ever be told because it didn't make it in this book or the next book or what have you, but something that maybe stood out to you either way.
Oh boy, I mean, that's a long list. I think one of my favorite moments is going down to the basement and having Marcin show me the elevator machinery, which is in the basement. It's not in a rooftop penthouse like you would expect. And showing me the wooden broomstick they use to reset the mechanism when it gets out of whack.
The broomstick.
Because, it doesn't conduct electricity.
Sure.
And so you watch it going up and down and you see the electric sparks firing and you're like, wow, this operates exactly the same as when the building opened. That stuff is amazing. Or he took me up to the penthouse on the roof and showed me this old kind of clockwork mechanism that used to show the elevator operators what floor somebody had called them from. A lot of people don't know that when they ring that bell, the elevator operators have no idea of knowing where they are. They have to go looking for you. They just hear the bell. And so they go up and down cruising, looking for you. And there are these skinny little mirrors on the side of the cars that they use. If you stand too close to the button after you press it, they'll have a hard time seeing you. So the good etiquette is to press the button and step back so the operators can see you.
I did not know that.
Like learning all that stuff, to me, I mean, it's just, I feel like a kid in a candy store. It's delightful.
Wow. I mean, that really just goes to show you what life was like back then too.
Yeah.
Well, how much we take for granted now. Just hitting a button for an elevator that shows up on the floor that you're on.
Yeah.
Back in the days, somebody just kind of had to figure it out by vision and sound and really be in tune to the building.
I say that modern elevators are like teleportation because the door closes and then it opens again and then you're in a new place. And these elevators are like a carnival ride. You see everything moving and you might even feel a little unsettled if you haven't done it before.
Yeah, you can definitely see the floors go by you as you go up, and if you want to make conversation with somebody, you can. But you mentioned earlier about the radiator system being slowly put back to the way that it was.
Yeah.
And I imagine that is because in the last few years, there's been a new ownership group that bought the building. Is that right?
So oh my gosh, I'm going to forget that. Was it 2005? I should have these dates emblazoned in my memory. I think it was 2005 that Bob Berger bought the building from Tom Graham. And he had a little more money to invest.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't a massive investment at the time, but gradually he was improving things. And kind of around 2015 or something, he started some renovations on the Studebaker Theater.
That's what I remember.
The ceiling was water damaged. They 3D printed the ceiling of the Studebaker with help from somebody from the Art Institute and started to restore it to its glory. Sadly, during the pandemic, Bob Berger passed unexpectedly, and his daughter Erica, who was no longer living in Chicago but certainly grew up here, was suddenly thrust into the role of hands-on owner, and she really rose to the occasion in the way that I don't think any owner has previously. She recognized the need for a professional artistic staff, and she hired Jacob Harvey, who's the artistic director of the building, and a professional theater staff, and modernized the way tickets are sold and everything. But she also really started pumping money into the building. And she is very modest. She won't say how much. It's been many millions of dollars, quite clearly. And the building has come to life in a way that this is a remarkable period for the Fine Arts Building. And I think all of Chicago should be grateful. People call this an artist colony often, and it's not. It's always been a privately owned building that is a for-profit business. And we've been fortunate in recent decades to have enlightened owners who care about the building and care about the mission. But with Tom Graham, the first enlightened owner of the modern era, didn't have the money to invest. And Bob Berger had more and put more into it. And Erica Berger has really taken her father's legacy and doubled down, and just this is a transformational time in the Fine Arts Building right now, and we're so fortunate to be living through it.
I know, and I feel like, this building is very unique in the United States, let alone Illinois and also Chicago. Like, for how big it is and what it offers. I'm sure other places have some things that are similar, but not quite like this, and certainly not the history. You mentioned the Studebaker Theater. That is this beautiful theater that's been restored, that was in shambles for years, and to be restored. And I know there's another theater next to it that's probably next to get that up and running. But it really speaks to the history, the legacy of Chicago with the arts in general, right?
Yes.
Like, I feel like Chicago gets passed over a lot when you hear about arts in the world, especially when you talk about the United States. You hear about what goes on in LA, in New York. And, it seems like Chicago, for some reason or another, it always gets passed over. But man, we've done more for the arts as a city than most cities ever have.
I agree 100%. For some reason, we're still kind of an afterthought on the coast. And I see that in book publishing as well. Sometimes, authors with really big books, I look at their tours and it's coastal, and I don't understand why they're not coming here. We have an amazing, amazing network of independent bookstores. We've got passionate readers. We've got passionate consumers of the arts. But I will say that I think that the fact that we get overlooked a little bit is one of the things that makes our scene so special, because people aren't, I don't know, it's a little more down to earth, a little more blue collar. I think about that in terms of the Fine Arts Building. Like, the artists here, artists everywhere can be a little eccentric. We can be a little odd or a little different, but it's so down to earth here. It's so friendly, and from the kind of late 70s on, as the Fine Arts Building began its long, slow rebirth, it's been very democratic, right? It hasn't been elitist like the art. One of the stories that I love most about the Fine Arts Building is Tommy Durkin was an elevator operator for, I think it was almost 60 years in the end. And he was the premier party thrower in the Fine Arts Building. Think about that. He was the elevator operator. He came over from County Mayo, Ireland, as a teenager, became an elevator operator here at a very young age. But as an adult, he would throw these annual Christmas and St. Paddy's Day parties in the basement, and everybody, including the building owners, would come to his parties, right? And he's
the elevator operator.
He's the elevator operator.
Oh, by the way, I'm going to use your basement to throw a party.
Yeah, and I feel like, would that happen in New York? Maybe it has, and I don't know. But it just feels to me like that speaks to the kind of egalitarian spirit of Chicago arts, and I love that.
Absolutely, and the charm, right?
Yeah,
Just it's a charming story, and I've never met this man, but I can picture him in my head. I can picture these parties in the basement, true Chicago style, having the party in the basement when it's cold outside. Everybody goes down to the basement, the lights are all up, you're having a great time. A very Chicago rite of passage.
Absolutely. And sadly, Tommy's no longer with us, but the first floor is Durkin Hall. It's named for him, which again, the first floor of this amazing building is named for an elevator operator.
And that's very Chicago in itself.
Absolutely.
In this day and age, when you hear about all these cuts going on from the federal level down, that is why a place like this matters so much. Outside of that, it matters, of course. But like in the day and age where people, like you were saying, a lot of publishers are getting rid of the art sections in their publishing, and in the government, programs are being cut left and right. To have a place like this as a beacon to remind folks of what art can mean to a city, to a country, and to certainly the individuals of the city is important.
As the motto says over the front door, all in life passes, art alone endures.
That's fantastic. And the book, is it currently out now, and where can people buy it?
Book goes on sale June 3rd, so I don't know when this will release, but
so soon.
So very soon. And we're going to have a big book launch on June 13th, Friday the 13th, an auspicious day.
Perfect day. I love it. It's my favorite day.
It's going to be in Curtis Hall on the 10th floor here in the Fine Arts Building. There's a public event at 7 p.m. Books will be sold by Exile and Bookville, which is right here in the Fine Arts Building on the second floor.
People don't know that too, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like just one of the best bookstores in the country right here in the Fine Arts Building. People can buy the book from any book dealer, but I certainly encourage them to buy it here at the Fine Arts Building.
Absolutely, come down and take a look, because you can. You can walk through and look for was it Jamal the
Redbirds everywhere.
Yeah, Redbirds everywhere.
Yeah, it's appointment only, but he's right here on the 7th floor.
Absolutely. Well, Keir, thank you so much for taking time to chat with me about this lovely book. I can't wait to get my hands a physical copy of it. This is one of those where you need the physical copy.
Absolutely.
Getting the digital version is just not going to be the same.
No, got to hold it in your hands. No, thank you so much, Tom. I've really enjoyed this.
Absolutely. All right, that is the story from the 78 here at the Fine Arts Building right on Michigan Avenue. Tom Barnick, Chicago at gmail.com if you have a story from the 78 suggestion, or hit me up at the website storiesfromthe78.com. Thanks for watching, everybody. You really need to come in and check this out. There's history everywhere in this place.